Sometimes, as you read the Bible, you may feel you understand where the Bible writer's coming from. You know, Jude said an interesting thing one time. Beloved, while I was giving all diligence to write unto you of our common salvation, I was constrained to write unto you, exhorting you to contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all delivered unto the saints. For there are certain men crept in privily, even they who were of old, written of beforehand unto this condemnation. And then he goes on and says similar things along that vein. They're written of old, they're crept in privily, which is a good mark of a false teacher. And that's why, with God's help, I desire to offer a very simple sermon, though the Bible sometimes is never simple, you have to study, but a sermon on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. One, a marriage is really of God, and it's a good thing. And he that findeth a wife findeth a good thing. But therefore shall a man, it says, leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh, so that they're no more two, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Matthew 2, 23 and 24, and surrounding territory. I like to preach on the good of marriage. And I could. I had a very good wife, and I could go on and on about that. But in thinking of that, I found out that I might need to change things a little bit, because I feel compelled to preach on some of the damage that's done in simple marriage, divorce, and remarriage. I had a preacher, I don't know why, but approached me Monday. And he said, you know, I went to a place, and the elders, after I was there, you know, Bill Jackson spent one day at the place, he told me, just one day. And because of what he was told, he just had to turn around and go back. But this man, this preacher, told me, he said, you know, I had the elders tell me, don't give any preaching on marriage, divorce, and remarriage around here. Will cause trouble. Some of our own marriages among the eldership, not just like people would think was right. And so we're just telling you what not to preach on. He said, well, I made up my mind, I might as well quit preaching. He said, I thought I'd just get a job, earn a living, and preach on the side as I was able, which is about where I tell young people sometimes today, not a bad idea to have a job and preach too. Some of you won't understand that, but your wives would, after they'd packed up and left several times, just drop. The wives would understand. I like to preach on the good of a marriage and all the delightful things about it. No one should ever be discouraged about marriage. It's a good thing. Beloved, while I was giving all diligence, I was just hurrying myself to write unto you concerning our common salvation, he had second thoughts for some reason. Maybe like me the other day, Monday, when a preacher said, I just felt I can't preach. Might as well get another job and then try to do good on the side. While I was constrained, Jude says, to exhort you to contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all delivered unto the saints. I don't think that everyone should agree with that. It's not been my experience that everyone would think you should contend earnestly for the faith. One woman, Bill Jackson, used to talk about, just would say the same thing over and over. Why can't we have peace? It's funny, I was up in Canada, and a preacher said that he had a lady who said that. Why can't we have peace? And he said, I was just sick of it, and I told her, why don't you go convert the devil? then we'll all have gravy around here. It's just not that way. So even though you sometimes feel you might say that, there are certain men crept in privily, even they who were of old, written up beforehand unto this condemnation, turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness and denying our only Master and Lord. Jesus is our Master and Lord. That word is despote. Despot you usually think of as a bad term. And among nations, that's someone who has utter, complete control. He owns you and everything about you. So to him we have to give heed, ought to give heed, and be willing to give heed. And he loves us and makes it easy for us to. Now we all love peace and calm and joy. But there is a devil. I don't think to understand everything that God designed things for, but I know our life here on earth to get to heaven is not always going to be just peaches and cream. God's designed it in some ways we have to suffer, and suffer hardship. One of our young preachers from Southwest, I've told you, came back after he preached a sermon here. And I'm sure he felt very good. I didn't mean to mess it up or anything, but with a smile and congenialness, I said, now do me a favor. Go out and suffer hardship. And he grinned. And he saw I wasn't grinning back. He said, you're serious? And I said, yes. Why do you think Paul said that to young men? Go suffer hardship for Jesus Christ. It has to be that way. And surely preaching is a big part of that. You have to preach on things you know some brethren are not going to like. I don't know. Seems like for a while there, we've had a good run here at Portland. Is that where we are, Portland, Texas? But we had a good run here. I think it started with Lynn Matheny. And personally, calling names, I shouldn't, but I happen to know everybody. But Lynn had a hard time on that and had to leave. And it wasn't the elders that told him to, but a lot of brethren caused enough stink or whatever that the elders felt they had to. But anyway, I would kind of blame that, even though I felt called upon to speak the truth. I told one of the ringleaders, you know, Lynn never should have been fired. He was preaching the truth. He should have been listened to. But I don't know, blame some as much as I loved him, Bobby Cullum. It should have been such around here that should not have been shocking to hear the truth on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And I do know Bobby. As a matter of fact, I told the elders at Southwest, he's one of the most sincere young men I've ever known. They had me talk to him about some things. But nevertheless, it should not be shocking. But how many churches in this area do you really think are getting to hear truth on marriage, divorce, and remarriage tonight, anytime in the last year? When I was a young preacher, I heard an older preacher in a little meeting that we were in. How many times, brethren, how long has it been since you've heard a sermon on instrumental music and why it's wrong? It's food for thought. I remember Johnny Ramsey getting up one day in class and said, look, I want to stand here unashamedly before y'all and say, instrumental music is wrong, a violation of God's authority. And I make no bones and don't feel bad telling everybody that. It's kind of good to hear someone say the truth. And at great cost sometimes. To have people go to hell, Jude knew that all he had to do, and preachers following had to do, was just be silent on some things. And they would go to hell. For whatever reason we give, we're to contend earnestly for the faith and not deny that we should do that. Now, of course, would be a little foolish of someone to think you do the same thing over and over all the time and you run something in the ground. No, we're not talking about that. But when you're preaching, you mix them up and you find a time to get to all of it. And regularly, people have to hear or lose their soul. And it's a marvel to me nowadays. I marvel at a lot of things, but that people can take that so lightly. That I don't have to preach on that because, well, they'll just lose their soul over it if they understand. I don't understand how the thinking goes on that. Seems like that's why we're here as a church, to try to keep people from losing their soul. Behind Matthew 19, 3 through 9, we have passages like this. Matthew 10, 34. Jesus said, "Think not that I came to send peace on the earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. I came to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household." And yet one of my best friends, and I can say today, I think one of the strongest young ladies, now not so young, but young ladies at that time, said, "Oh, if Jerry just wouldn't have put in that verse on Thrust magazine, if you'd have just found something else to put there." Now, she wouldn't say that, and she knows better. HD one time in preaching said, "You know why we're here? We're put here in the church to fight." That's not wrong. As a matter of fact, not all the time. I'm glad to say I'd be worn out, but occasionally people are going to get riled. You have to preach truth. So I wonder, have any of you ever had someone creep in with a false doctrine on marriage, divorce, and remarriage? Have they messed with your family on it? Well, I've had them do that. And I've had drunken phone calls and everything as a result of just standing for the truth with my family. As a matter of fact, I think one of the worst experiences in my life when my brother so proudly, older brother, and I mean older so much so it's rare, he's almost like a father to me, calls me up and says, "Well, I heard your preaching. You know, we didn't get together often. He was gone overseas and this and that. And I just proposed to this lady here, and I want you to do the wedding." And I had to say, "Well, now, that's good. And I know your marriage situation, but I'd have to know hers. I don't want you to do something that would get you in trouble with God." So has she ever been married before or anything? "Well, I don't know. Here she is. I'll let you talk to her." On the telephone, first time. I don't know why. Maybe that wouldn't bother you, but it was hard. But I had to give it to her, and then I had to say, "I can't marry y'all." She said, "Yeah, we got a divorce." "Well, did he lack faithfulness?" "No, we just decided to get a divorce." I said, I asked that of everyone. "I can't marry y'all because I would be helping you do something God would say was wrong. I can't do that." Have you ever had anyone creep in? I've had it with my sister also. Well, I have. Being a preacher, I know it can cost souls. Though, maybe, who knows? God knows. I never have been able to feel right about preaching someone into heaven or into hell. I did have a funeral one time where some stranger came up and said, "I want you to tell everybody she's in heaven." I had no idea. I didn't really know her. And even then, how do I know people? God sees people. I don't. I don't know people, so I never agreed to do it. He kept on and kept on until I got to wondering what was going to happen after I was through. But he didn't say anything afterward. But being a preacher, I know I can have a soul at stake if I don't preach truth on this or other subjects, whether I like it or not. It has to be done. I also think about our blessing to have so many young people. Maybe I ought to point over here. That's where they usually are. But they need to hear it. Young people before marriage, just married, young people need to know what's in stake. I hate to tell you this. I don't like to go into personal life a whole lot, but it's kind of unique the way I proposed to Barbara and she accepted. It was a kind of, if you could see it, I think you'd laugh. But we didn't. We took it seriously. I started off knowing the answer to this, and pretty much the answer to what she would say. I'd tested her. I hate to say that. She had tested me. But I said, have you ever thought about marrying a preacher? Yes. As a matter of fact, I hope someday I would. Well, what if you married a preacher and he wanted to go way off, away from your family and do mission work? Way off somewhere, because I had my heart set on getting up in the States or somewhere in mission work. She said, well, that would be good to preach to people way off. And I couldn't think of much else, so I said, well, what would you do if he wanted to go preach in Red China? We were mighty near at war with Red China back then, and not too good today. She said, well, I guess we'd have to fight excuse me, our way in. I could see her doing that. But nevertheless, what a way to propose. I guess we'd have to fight our way in. Well, I knew I had the right one. We had a prayer about it before we got married. I'm glad we did. She went through a lot, never heard a murmur. She'd been cussed out in Bible studies. She just took it like that's part of it. She had hot chocolate with some vampires that I met at school. And she just went at it like, well, that's part of it. They got a soul too. I think if we could have been around them longer, they were interested. Little Ross was just barely reaching the blackboard in my classroom when I had that hot chocolate with him. And they left, and he was writing on the backboard, barely able to reach the bottom of it. He said, you know what I think? And I said, what? And he said, I think some people think they're vampires, but they're not. I'm glad he got that out of it. Now, I like people, but the Bible has taught me one thing in life. At my age still, I need to be watchful. I need to help you be watchful, encourage you to be watchful. And, if I meet a false teacher and I know he's a false teacher, I'm just not right at that point ready to throw him off, show ugliness toward him. I've seen guys I was in school of preaching with. I do. I tell you, I can hardly shake hands with one of them. I've got the same Bible they got, and for them to be teaching what they teach, it's just not acceptable. But I found out that with patience, and it says that a preacher should be patient, with patience sometimes they're converted. Unless Johnny Robertson and Caleb are lying, they've got some up there they wish I could get up there and study with we would call them false teachers, but they've been converted. And they want to learn and grow, and they don't have time for them. Well, I'd love that. And I've seen some converted myself. What I do, I'm watchful, but I don't give up on someone right off. Show them respect for being God's created beings, God's creatures, for loved of God. But when you find out they're a false teacher and they teach things that will be damnable to people's souls, I don't respect them for that at all. Donnie Metters, some of you remember, most of you I'm sure don't. It's a long time since we had a debate here. But I asked an opponent who believed in faith only and that you could do nothing to save yourself. I pulled out a little pointer and I said, I've got a present for you. Now, you have not earned this. You've not paid me anything for it. And yet it's a free gift. And I'm going to give it to you. Just come up. So he was about as old as I am now. But he was lumbering up out of his chair and about to come. I said, but now, when you come to get it, you're doing something. You're doing something. He sat back down. He didn't believe you did anything to be saved. Everybody just saved without having to act. without any action. So Donnie Meadows said, Jerry didn't have to do that. Why, he already had him on the ropes, which made me feel good to hear him say that. But nevertheless, he didn't have. I tell you what, my feelings are, I'd do it again 10 times more in front of people if that would squash a false doctrine that will damn souls. Why not? I'd feel bad not to. I missed an opportunity. Donnie was a strong Christian. He and I are the best of friends. I think that's the first debate he ever was at. Now, I tell you, you say that over at UIL, I got to teach 5 years debate. They would frown on that. You're supposed to intimidate your opponent, they say. That's in the books. That's what debate's about. You want people to know you. One of the things they should know about you is they feel intimidated around you. I would do things, we couldn't in debate have backpacks and stuff. No, you had to have a briefcase, look professional like a lawyer. Women had certain makeup that we would carry with us that they could use. And so intimidate is not wrong if you're pointing out the truth and making people see it. A lot of people don't listen that carefully. But in a debate, you try to make sure your opponent knows and his people know, and you do things that you wouldn't normally find your style. I like people, but I like to be watchful. I was at San Marcos, and I was going to move to Southwest, teaching the school there. But we were looking for a preacher. One came in to try out for the job Sunday. And so I thought I would just try a little bit, find out where he stood. And this was a hot issue and a very serious issue. So I said, do you ever have any trouble where you are on marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and what you believe on that and all? No, never had any. Change the subject, and I fell for it. He started talking about something else. Well, he went to the elders, and something like this, they asked him flat out, what do you teach on marriage, divorce, and remarriage? Good thing, even in a Bible study to do. Anyway, he said, I can preach it round or flat. What do y'all want? I can preach it any way you want. Well, he didn't get a job. Now, I don't mean to be cruel. I don't, I'm so likable. Everyone knows that I'm not a harsh person and would not dare do that in the pulpit. Maybe I'm lying, maybe I'm not. But, that man lied. He wasn't really looking for a job, for a preaching job. He wasn't really a preacher. I can preach it round or flat. I wonder what these elders here would do. About the same as San Marcos said, well, we don't need you here. But they turned him down immediately. He wasn't a preacher in my estimation, my way of thinking of a gospel preacher. He was a men pleaser. And he just wanted a job, any job. It didn't matter whether he had to speak truth or not. Paul said, for am I now seeking the favor of men or of God? If I were still striving to please men, I should not be a servant of Jesus Christ. Galatians 1:10. And then again, that important scripture that we read today. They came to him, trying him and saying, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And Jesus answered and said unto them, as he quite often did, it seems to me, when he was being tested, have you not read, he starts off that way, have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. So that they're no more two, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Well, I think we can understand Jesus. Some people would say we can't, but I think we can. And they did. The Pharisees did. And they had a problem because of a Bible verse. And so they asked Jesus, Why then did Moses command to give her a bill of divorcement and to divorce her, put her away? Jesus said, it really makes you think. He said, sort of jaw-dropping, I think, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, suffered you to put away your wife. But from the beginning it hath not been so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except for fornication, committeth adultery. And he that marrieth her when she's put away, committeth adultery. Well, they said it's just not expedient to marry. But Jesus goes on and talks, and I'm sure they got the understanding we can keep any command of God if we know about it. I don't know. I hope I'm not out of line. I might be, but I know that a lot of us like to preach. Get up here, deliver sermons. Hey, look, I delivered a Wednesday night sermon. I'm a preacher of God. There's more to it. If you're living of the gospel and your wife's packing up the bags to move again, and another thing a preacher said Monday, said my wife didn't like it because she hated to move. I think that's understandable. But nevertheless, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, tell the truth. Let God take care of you. Are we abandoned here on earth? Or will God take care of me? He found, for me, once I was fired for preaching the truth, the marriage, divorce, remarriage, he found a real idiot, dumb church to take me in. You can guess who it is. And they knew what they were doing when they did it. And so I owe a lot to the congregation here. Well, Jesus answered them, though. Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, suffered you to put away your wives. Now, I suffer some things. I got cats that drive me crazy, but I suffer them. You suffer what you don't like. But God he suffered many things with you. He doesn't want divorce, so he had to suffer it. Now, why? I could almost say, watch the news and you'll see why God suffered it. Men kill their wives. And so he suffered them to put away their wives. I think that's part of it. But so what remarriage might be acceptable with God? My brother's wife that he finally married, but did not take it out on me every time we got together like some in my family did. But he didn't. He was nice about it. So what remarriage might be acceptable with God? We want it proved scripturally. God suffered you to put away your wives. Well, what can we do if you do go through a divorce? Is there any in God's word exception that he will accept? We want it proved scripturally. First, we recall, God did allow polygamy. He stated in the very beginning his word on it. He didn't like it. It was wrong. He allowed it for a while, just like, with my children, and I'm sure me as a young one growing up with my parents, we don't like children to get food all over themselves when they have supper or lunch or anything. We don't like the donut sugar all over their head and black all over their face as they're eating. So we try. I think God dealt with humankind much like we deal with little children. But you get to a certain stage, and when he felt he had uplifted them enough that according to his divine understanding, they were able to keep it, he said, I hate putting away. I hate divorce. And of course, that was Malachi chapter 2, verse 16. By the time of the minor prophets, he could get back the way he started it in the beginning. One man, one woman. Finally, he said, let every man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 2. Now again, let's look at this important scripture. The Jews came to him, trying him and saying, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Now, this is the Pharisees coming to him, trying him. He answered and said, have you not read, he who made them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother, and cleave unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. So that they're no more two, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. Which was exactly what they were doing, putting it asunder. And just letting people, according to their teaching, put away their wives for every cause. So they asked him, why? And I would ask too, probably not noticing like I should, why then did Moses command to give a bill of divorcement, put it in her hand, and send her out of his house? And a surprising answer. God, because of the hardness of your heart, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it hath not been so. Now here's the chilling words. And I say unto you, it's like Jesus just threw off all semblance of, I better study what the rabbis had said, or I better act like I'm going to talk like they talk. I'm going to talk like whom I am. I'm God. I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whosoever shall marry her when she's put away, committeth adultery. Matthew 19, 3 through 9. Still, after all of that, I'm sure they had many a problem. We come down in our age, and people have a problem. As a matter of fact, it's something so prevalent that before I'm through with the Bible study, I always like to let people know what Jesus said about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. I'd hate to have people come in the church, get all intertwined with y'all, and then some poor soul learn, well, you're not accepting their marriage, and the elder's going to withdraw from them for that, and it causes a hullabaloo, a lot of bad feelings. So you just have to point it out. Well, when a man taketh a wife and marrieth her, here's the scripture they were using. Then it shall be, if she find no favor in his sight, because he finds some unseemly thing in her, that he shall write her, Moses said, a bill of divorcement, give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she's departed out of his house, it may be she goes and becomes another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her and find some unseemly thing in her, and write a bill of divorcement, give her in her hand, and send her out of his house. Or if her latter husband die, who sent her away, her former husband who sent her away cannot take her again to be his wife after that she's defiled. That's an abomination in the sight of God. It's pretty clear, very strict, but it's clear. And it's something the Jews should have been teaching. That's Deuteronomy 24, verses 1 through 4. A bill of divorcement. And God put that in there probably to save lives for a while until he could get them up to that point where he could go ahead and tell them what he demanded. And that was because of the hardness of their heart. The Jews at that point really thought when they would read Deuteronomy 24, 1 through 4, just like these Pharisees, they thought the problem was in unseemly thing. If he finds some unseemly thing in her, well, they're going to try Jesus. Now, what's unseemly thing? Some of them said it was fornication. Others, under a different rabbi, thought it was anything. You could even burn the lentils or the beans, and that be some unseemly thing. Put them away. What is Jesus going to say? He goes back and gives the utter truth on it. You're hard-hearted is why you heard that from Moses. Not only that, unseemly thing has to be fornication. Nothing else. Well, I don't know what to do or what to say to make it more real, more clear, except If you don't like what I said tonight, I can tell you, go out and you don't have to look very far or very hard. You'll find preachers will tell you exactly what you want to hear. As a matter of fact, it's a good place for a false teacher, because when you tell people it's hard teaching, I'm going to make it easier for you, you know, they'll love you and they'll accept you better and you can get along in life better. Well, anyway, that's the law of God on divorce, remarriage, and marriage, really. The most pertinent, shocking thing is, if you'll just hear this one thing, then I'll talk to you and you can study with anyone you want. Matthew 19:9. I preached on that at Southwest. I was walking down the aisle afterward with one of the elders, and I said, you know, I said it like it is in the Bible, and when it comes to marriage, divorce, remarriage, I just stay with Matthew 19:9. He said, I do too. It's a good idea, and that's what God said. Well, there are all kinds of ways to get around it. Y'all don't mind me spending a couple of 3 hours extra tonight, I'll go ahead. But I think they're all going to lose ground in the honest and good heart's mind. I have preachers before that'll say, shame that you believe different. How can you believe different from Matthew 19:9? It's so clear, too clear. So I preach on it. I preach regularly. And who knows, with God's, permission, with God's will, someone down the road I might save a soul tonight that I will never know because of you and because of what you'll preach and what you'll do and what you'll say. And it's not always easy. It's easy to say, well, I just don't like that. And you'll find, hey, I'll tell you a way that nullifies that. Find all the preachers you want on that, on any subject, really. But one more time, just to pamper me, would you hear Matthew 19:9? Jesus said, I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife for every cause committeth adultery. Except for fornication, that's the exception. Now, we even have some brethren that want to do away with the exception. I came up at a place, the Arkansas, up in the Ozarks, and there was a brother there that believed that you shouldn't say except for fornication. And I was gone. He thought that's his chance, so he gave it, I guess. Preacher's gone. But they had a guy that had been in the Air Force. He was a good farmer, and he was teaching class. And the guy says, see, it doesn't, except for fornication, it should not be given heed to. You see what I mean? And this old farmer stood there and said, I see what you mean. If I said load up all of them, all the cows, but not the young, not the calves. You'd load the calves up too. He couldn't understand the word except for fornication. It's happened many a time. Now, what do? You have to trust people. They have to trust their soul to what they're doing. And I'm sure some have lied to me, and there's nothing I can do about it. They're not lying to God. Well, it's serious business. Some of us who do stand up here and preach might try sometime. Not with this doctrine especially, not all the time especially. You'll see I don't do that. But try to preach on some of these doctrines that are not so popular or not so well understood or a little bit hard, instrumental music, marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And get your feet wet here before you go off somewhere where you don't have so many friends that love you. It'd be good to every once in a while try it out and get to going on it. Well, again, I'll repeat now everything I've said. Let me repeat it one more time now. If you need to talk to someone, you have doubts, you want to confirm something, I'll be happy to talk with you. Some have gone to the elders, and we have good elders here that'll talk to you about it. What do you do? What's the situation? If you don't want to talk to them, you got friends here, people that love you. Talk to them. But one thing, please consider getting it right. I told a man one time, you know, it's very hard for a man to be faced with a bad marriage and realize he's going to live the rest of his life single, and kids are involved and all of that. What do you do? And without batting an eye, he lived up in the Ozarks, was a mechanic. But he said, look, if you lay this life down beside the next life, you got no choice. You know what to do. You've got to do what it takes to be right with God. If we can help you in any way, please come as we stand and sing.